honor to introduce our distinguished guest, Christopher Castle, Director of the Division for Peace and Sustainable Development at UNESCO. Before taking his current role at UNESCO, Christopher served as International Institute for Educational Planning and then as Chief of the Section of Health and Education.
Mr. Castle, the floor is yours. Let's welcome Mr. Christopher Castle.
Well, thank you very much for that warm welcome, and it's such a great pleasure and honor to be here. As a former scout myself, it's really quite an honor to be invited to join you this morning. So my task today is to share with you UNESCO's perspective on the evolving landscape of education, and in particular, what competencies are essential for learners to thrive in the 21st century. As you're all aware, we are in a world that's facing new and new forms of challenges. The increasingly interdependent and interrelated world has its benefits, but at the same time, we're witnessing the rapid spread of hateful ideologies and disinformation in physical spaces and digital spaces, and pitting groups and societies against each other. Did you know that approximately 1 in 3 students has been bullied in the past month, underscoring the urgent need to combat all forms of school violence, including bullying and cyberbullying globally? And despite the critical role that good quality, comprehensive sexuality education plays in helping young people make safer and better choices in life, it's disheartening to note that only 28% of young people report that their school teaches sexuality education well. This statistic highlights a significant gap between the potential impact of sexuality education and the current reality faced by learners. Moreover, consider this: 73 million children in need don't receive school meals. And this emphasizes another dimension of the challenge we're confronting in ensuring access to good quality education and school health and nutrition services for all learners. In our current context, we are struggling to achieve justice for vulnerable populations, to bring about genuine understanding of each other's differences and our diversities, and to address deeply rooted inequalities. These are not only challenges, we also need to be proactive in addressing the climate crisis and be aware of our patterns of behavior when it comes to unsustainable consumption. One international study targeting youth across the world, ages 16 to 25, found that 59% of them are very or extremely worried about climate change. And more than 45% of them said their feelings about climate change negatively affect their daily lives. Last year, UNESCO conducted an international survey monitoring 17,000 young people aged 11 to 19 years old from 166 countries. And the results were alarming. 70% of them said they cannot explain climate change or can only explain its broad principles and don't know anything about it. Many said they want to learn what they can do, not just what it is. Youth demands are for learning-centered, experiential, and reflective ways of learning, making climate change education more fun, solutions-based, and action-oriented. In grappling with these interdependent challenges that transcend borders, it has become evident that no person or country can tackle these problems alone. Fighting for social justice, reducing gas emissions, or combating global pandemics is a shared responsibility and requires collective action. And yet, as inequalities are widening and societies are increasingly fragmented, we are witnessing an erosion of democratic values around the world. Young people's trust in government institutions to serve their interests has weakened to historic lows in the last 15 years. So according to the latest survey from the 2022 International Civics and Citizenship Education Survey, a study conducted across 24 education systems that investigated the changing ways in which young people are prepared for their roles as citizens, three-quarters of these students said they believe that democracy is still the best form of government. So that's a good result. However, only 55% said they believe the system works. Up to 2/3 of students believe members of parliament usually forget the needs of people, expressing a decline in trust in institutions. in particular in courts, parliament, and the media. For the first time since 2009, the 2022 results of this important survey reveal many decreases in civic knowledge of young people. How do we as a society even begin the process to advance in a way that addresses these problems and allows us to collectively move forward in actively building a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world? Well, an important starting point, as I think all of you are aware, is through the power of education. At UNESCO, we believe education should prepare us for life so that we're able to lead it with dignity, treat others with respect, and act in the face of adversity. The world we envision is one where all inhabitants of the planet can thrive, one we're able to take care of ourselves and each other, and where there's no shortage or no shortcut to empowering generations of learners with knowledge, skills, and values that ensure no one is left behind in the process. Education, if crafted with the proper tools, can become a force that motivates and empowers learners to make informed decisions and take meaningful action at the community and global levels. Education gives us more than just hope in the face of uncertainty. It gives us something to do. It allows us to be part of the solution. The kind of education we need, and that I've just described, is what we call transformative. This is what young people repeatedly demand, and it's the kind of education they want. But what does it actually mean? It means that education needs to be context-specific. It must be seen as a lifelong journey that's not limited to the classroom, but is taking place all the time, online and offline. It means that education must recognize and valorize the dignity and diversity of all learners in all types of setting and eliminate all barriers to learning. It means that it should go beyond developing numeracy and literacy, which, as fundamental as they are, should also go towards fostering essential critical thinking, creativity, empathy, collaboration, and problem-solving skills. And again, as a former Scout, I know that's a key part of the Scout movement. It means that education must foster nonviolence, respect, sharing, and listening, and be a place where young people learn on a daily basis to embrace diversity and put their civic commitment into practice as responsible global citizens. It means that education can transform lives when learners feel valued, acknowledged, safe, and included in the community. So this brings me to UNESCO's efforts to highlight our commitments to promote an education that provides purpose and meaning and contributes to the full development of every single individual. Acting as a canopy or an umbrella to our work is the newly adopted recommendation on education for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. And this was a recommendation that took several years to develop and gave a new look and essence to a previous recommendation which has been guiding UNESCO and our member states or our countries for the past 50 years, since 1974. The new revised recommendation defines education's evolving role to effectively create and provide good quality education for all. It recognizes all the factors and components of education that are inextricably intertwined and leaves room for adapting to local contexts. Significantly, it is informed by a new understanding of peace, namely that achieving peace in society is not simply defined by the absence of conflict and war, but peace is something that is built and nurtured by the behaviors and actions of each and every individual on a daily basis. Now, how do we fundamentally change behaviors and therefore systems without exacerbating injustices and inequalities? Well, one thing we can do is use this new recommendation as a map. The recommendation has 14 concrete guiding principles for what should inform education systems and 12 learning outcomes for what the necessary knowledge, skills, values, attitudes, and behaviors are to accomplish our vision for the future. And in this vein, UNESCO works in 3 domains: what we learn, where we learn, and how we learn. For what we learn, we focus on developing content that allows learners to gain the key skills needed to navigate a rapidly changing society and that give us purpose and meaning in life. For example, greening our curricula, an education that cultivates solidarity and appreciation for shared humanity at the local and global levels, and that reconciles and deals with histories of violent pasts. For where we learn, we work to create sustainable and safe learning environments in and outside the school and educational institutions, including non-formal and informal settings. And this includes green schools and ensuring safe spaces in education by employing social and emotional learning, preventing violence in schools, and addressing gender-based violence and bullying and cyberbullying. And finally, for how we learn, we work around teaching and learning approaches that put the learner at the center. We want learners to be able to apply the knowledge, skills, and values to solve real-life challenges at home, in schools, and in their communities. We have youth-led advocacy programs that mobilize and empower young people and bring them into the solution-creating process, which encourages them to take action in their community, just as the Scouting movement seeks to do. Additionally, we aim to surround learners and educators with strong support systems to improve their mental health and well-being in and around schools. And I think all of us have seen an increased attention to and awareness of the importance of paying attention to mental health. All of this is to say that we're forced to navigate a very complex environment where education cannot be siloed, but must work with all components of life to achieve our collective goal to provide accessible, good quality education for all, and produce individuals who are knowledgeable about their local context within the greater global landscape, are able to critically think about their situations, and are empowered to make decisions, to take action for the benefit of all. The World Scouts are, of course, an integral component to achieving this goal, and your mission and vision to lead movements for positive change are exactly what we need in these difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castle, for your say. We have a Q&A session, a short time, so we're going to have a line in the room. And, well, if anyone has a question for Mr. Castle, raise your hand. Can I have... perfect. Good morning. So, it's the last day. No more question tomorrow. Yes. One. Okay. I see one here, and I.
Hi.
Okay.
Good morning.
Yes. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes.
Your age, your country, and make a short question.
My name is Daniel. I'm from Brazil. I'm 39. I'm a teacher in my country. So my question is, does UNESCO make a difference between the countries when they do this approach, or is just this universal approach, what you're saying, or you're taking in account of the difference between the countries regarding the access of education and other aspects? Thank you.
Thanks very much for that question. So I think like many other parts of the UN, we do focus on developing what we call normative or standard setting guidance at a global level. But of course, that's not going to work everywhere all the time. There is no one-size-fits-all recipe. And so a lot of the work then goes into supporting countries to adapt and implement global guidance that's relevant to the local context. That's a very important part of the process. And by the way, we can't just develop international guidance or recommendations or things and hope that countries will use them and that they'll somehow trickle down to have an impact at the local level or the level of the learner. We have to accompany countries. We have to work with ministries of education, headmasters, teachers, and others to make sure that that guidance is understood, put into the local context, and supported for its use and implementation, right down to the level of the learner. And by the way, young people themselves have played a role in developing the revised recommendation that I mentioned and shared with you. We have to stop looking at learners as just passive beneficiaries of education. they need to be involved in co-creating the kind of education that they want, and we are seeing them increasingly demand that.
Thank you, Mr. Casal. I see a few other, yes, I think Ram. Yeah, Ram.
Thank you so much. My name is Ram and I'm from Nepal. I do agree with so many things in your presentations. My question is, yes, definitely when we see the vision of all the UN agencies and scouting, there are so many common areas that we can work together. But in terms of the partnership, there are some kind of struggles to partner with the UN agencies in local level. How do you think that we can collaborate with UNESCO and other UN agencies with the common vision in the national level and local level, especially on the area of the education on peace and sustainable development? So that's my questions. Thank you.
Thanks. These are good questions. If I didn't know better, I'd think you planted them or something, but I promise you I had nothing to do with it. So look, being perfectly honest, I think collaborating with the UN at the local level or country level isn't always very obvious or straightforward. We do in every country have what we call national commissions, and some of you may know about them. They're often affiliated with ministries of education, but not only. And then in a number of countries, I think over 50 countries, UNESCO has 50 field offices. We also have regional bureau, and then we also have what we call institutes. There's 8 institutes across the world that work specifically on different aspects of education, and all of those provide opportunities to collaborate and ask for support from UNESCO. We also have a network of what we call UNESCO chairs, which work at the higher education level or tertiary level. And these are professors typically who hold a UNESCO chair designation on a range of different educational topics. So we have some, for example, that work on climate change education. We have some that work on health and well-being. We have some that work on sustainable development, really a broad range of different topics all over the world. And so really what I would encourage is that your first port of call should be to find out who your national commission is for UNESCO at the country level. If you have a UNESCO field office in your country, even better, contact them as well. And then, of course, UNESCO is not the only UN agency that works in education. UNICEF also has an education program, and many of you may already collaborate with UNICEF. Other UN agencies as well may be working in the education space. The World Health Organization collaborates very closely with us at UNESCO when it comes to education for health and well-being, school health and nutrition programs, for example. I mentioned school feeding, and you might be thinking, well, I thought we were here to talk about education, but school feeding is really important when it comes to learning. We know that you can't learn well if you're hungry and you're not feeling well. And as I said, unfortunately, there are 73 million children worldwide who need a school meal that aren't getting one. So we still have a huge amount of work to do. And of course, when there are school meals available, that's a huge draw for children to come back to school if they're not in school or to stay in school if they are. And let me just add that unfortunately, in a lot of countries, for many children, that one school meal might be the only meal they have in the day. So it's an incredibly important part of getting kids into school, keeping them there, and creating an environment and a context where they're able to learn. Because I think all of us know very well, right? We're not just pretending to educate or provide learning opportunities. We need to make that a reality. We don't want to just get kids into school and then find out that they're not learning how to read and write, that they're not learning how to prepare themselves for life in the 21st century. And so we have to look beyond just learning itself, but think about all of those aspects that allow young people to learn in a safe space, in a good environment, free from violence and bullying, where they feel they're able to go without fear and participate fully, boys and girls.
This is very much connecting to what we said yesterday on how we make an opportunity real for everyone. Yeah. I think we had the last question. I was indicated there were a question over there. Okay, I might turn to Jonas.
Thank you. My name is Jonas. I'm from Ethiopia. You mentioned about school meals. That's very important. In the capital city of Addis Ababa now, they're feeding all elementary school students and they're providing uniform. The government's doing that. which is a good practice, but we still don't have that in the high schools, and we don't have it in the rest of the country. So it's a good start, but still we need to do more. In terms of, for example, here, Scouts are from different countries. We are sharing our best experiences, to better our NSO in different countries. Do you have any programs that different country shares their experience in this educational fields they're doing better, or like to encourage each other to learn from each other? If you have any platforms that's providing this kind of conference for Minister of Educations from different countries to share their best practices, I just want to know that. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Another good question. Yes, we do. I mean, I'm sure the Scouts, like many other global organizations, including the UN, put a premium on sharing good practice. And by the way, good practice also means sharing failure. If something's not working, we also have to share that, right? Because we have limited resources, and we want to make sure that we're investing in programs and activities and interventions that work, that have an impact. And I saw the recap from yesterday where there was apparently you had a segment on measurement. That's so important for so many different reasons, but also just to make sure that we can track, is what we're doing having an effect? Are we getting results? And are we putting our money, our resources, our time, and our investments in things that are going to have an impact and work? So it's critically important. And it's one of the reasons why the global guidance that UNESCO and the rest of the UN develops has to be based on the best available evidence. And data is incredibly important because we all have a responsibility to make sure that we're investing our resources and using our capacity in the best way possible. So there are a number of platforms that we have within UNESCO specifically. In the area of school health and nutrition, which we were just talking about, we have a health and education clearinghouse. It's actually housed, it's an online, free, open source platform with multiple different language versions of tools, learning materials, model curricula, and school policies that you can access for free and download those materials. The Health and Education Clearinghouse, and it's based here in Paris at our UNESCO International Institute for Educational Planning. And there are others. So I would encourage you to just go to the UNESCO website. Unfortunately, you may have to dig around a little bit because there's lots of different programs that UNESCO supports. I'm from the education sector, but you probably know that in our acronym, we also have science, so the natural and social sciences for the S, culture, and I'm guessing probably nearly all of you have heard about our World Heritage sites, both the tangible and intangible World Heritage, right? So it's not just the monuments and the buildings, but it's also the intangible World Heritage, the music, the dance, the poetry, and other aspects, the food, which apparently you enjoyed last night here in Paris. By the way, the baguette is an intangible World Heritage designation. So there's lots of different things that you'll find on the UNESCO website. You have to look around a little bit, go to the education part, have a look, and you'll find different platforms to get access to those good practices. And maybe I can just add that when we develop global guidance that then has to be used and adapted for use in a local context, we usually always try and include examples integrated in that guidance of good practice. So you'll typically find in Ethiopia, there was a program in this part of the country that experimented with this particular approach, and these are the results that they had. And again, we all like the good practices, but don't be shy about sharing the failures and the mistakes, because we learn from those as well.
I really like the fact you're mentioning the World Heritage. World Scouting and UNESCO, they have a partnership, and most of you may know that there is a patrimony badge program within the World Scout framework. So there are already a lot of interesting projects. I can mention that you're also taking questions in French, and Mr. Castle peut accepter des questions en français s'il y en avait. Oui, j'en vois une.
My name is Cleopatra John. I'm from Uganda, one of the small countries in Africa. And I've been listening in quite a lot and learning a lot. And I always want to think about my country, my local community, and my family. And I must confess to everybody that I am a product of Scouting, and I don't know if Ann Whiteford is here. As a child, there was a Unite project, and it was on polio vaccination and the 6 killer diseases. And I'm so humbled that now it means a lot to me as a mother of 2, and I'm very intentional about my children's health, about immunizing my children, and now my children are in the Scout program because I take them along with me every time I go camping. And they've learned to be very independent, and they decide, and these are like 3 and 4 years old. And my question is, are we intentional? Because most of the times the programs we do are maybe for leaders, and then we miss out the critical age and the learning age of every person. Like for every female, if you start learning after conception, then you have missed out. But if I start learning about life from when I am a girl or even a boy, and then by the time I make a decision to get married, to have my children, I know exactly what to do because I have learned from childhood. So are you intentional about when we start to learn? Because we start from conception. You know, what type of food does a mother eat? What type of care does a father give to an expectant mother? And I've learned it in my own country where all programs are like educational and they're so confiscated. What about this child who does not go to school but lives in the community and would love to know all these things so that when she makes a decision, she's very aware of what happens at every stage of development. And also about learning. Yeah, I don't want to think learning and education are the same, because learning happens in and out of school, in our environment, in our compound. So do we think about learning, or we think about education and getting a degree and going in offices and speaking English, French, and we forget about a population of people that don't go to school but can learn from an environment? And that's why I think comes to Scouting, because we are informal, so you reach out to everybody. So are you intentional about learning? And are we very intentional about the first steps of development so that you have a whole person who can do everything because they are aware and empowered?
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Great. Thank you very much for those comments and the question. In sub-Saharan Africa, when a girl becomes pregnant, 98% of those girls immediately lose their right to education. They don't go back to school. Even in countries where they may have right to return policies, it just doesn't happen because of the culture. And so you heard me mention a reference earlier on to comprehensive sexuality education. And one of the reasons why UNESCO, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, UN Women, and other UN agencies have come together to provide global guidance on sexuality education is because we know countries are very concerned about the sexual and reproductive health and rights of young people in their country. And countries understand the importance of girls' education, and they know that it's an empty promise to talk about a girl's right to education if we're not also making sure that those girls can have safer choices and decide when and how they become pregnant. And that's why comprehensive sexuality, one of the many reasons why sexuality education is important. But let me point out one thing. Sexuality education is not just about the biology of reproduction. It's about relationships. In fact, I believe in the UK, where probably some of you are from, the United Kingdom refers to their program as sex and relationships education, putting the emphasis on issues like consent, gender equality, respect, and it's about how we relate to each other. That's a really important part of sexuality education as well. So it's not just about the reproductive aspects of sexuality. I think your point about intentionality is really important. We have to also think about all the factors that could become a barrier to a person's right to education and getting into school and learning. One of them is menstruation. Way too many girls don't know what menstruation is when it happens to them. I believe in East Africa, where you're from, it's 2/3 of girls say they had no idea what menstruation was when it happened to them. 2/3. Imagine the unnecessary fear and indignity of living through that. It's completely unnecessary. Girls and boys should know about menstruation before it happens. And that's why age-specific topics and learning objectives on a whole range of topics, whether it's sexual and reproductive health or climate change or peace or violent histories or combating hate speech, all of those things are really important. Because when children don't get a good quality education that covers topics that will prepare them for life, and including challenges in the 21st century like climate change and sustainable development, then they're not getting the education that they need and that they're demanding. So the good news is we can introduce and teach these topics. We can do them in a culturally sensitive and appropriate way. And that's where you all come in and play a really critical role. You'll understand what the local terminology, what the local language, what the practices are, where children and young people would access services and how you could help them to do that, how we can involve critically parents in a good quality education as well, because it's not just schools, it's not just the Scouts, but it's also the parents and the community that play a really critical role in terms of good quality education. So there's a lot we have to think about in terms of, I'm often surprised people think education's such an easy thing, right? You build a school, you train the teachers and get them in there, you have some curricula, success. It's so much more complicated than that, as I think everybody in this room probably understands very well. But the good news is we can do it. And we have great learning materials. We have tons of evidence that's really useful that we can refer to help us when we want to improve the quality of educational programs, and most importantly, learning.
Thank you, Christopher Castle.